WMI and CIM, filtering, and the WMI query language. Now for both of these topics, we're going to be talking about the old WMI command as well as the new CIM command all at once. So I'll switch between Windows 7 and Windows 8 so that you can easily keep track of the old stuff way and the new stuff way. I'm going to show you how to specify filter criteria for both the CIM and WMI approaches so that rather than querying a bunch of stuff and having to loop through it on your computer, you're only getting back the exact objects that meet your criteria. You're having the WMI service or CIM do more of the work for you, which is great. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the WMI query language, or WCL, because that's a language you may run across in online examples, or you may already know, and PowerShell is completely able to utilize those, so it gives you a little bit of a shortcut if you need to repurpose something. We'll start here in Windows 7 because I want to show you what you can do with the basic old WMI command first. Now keep in mind the same command exists in Windows 8, just switching between Windows 7 and Windows 8 helps me keep track of what feature set I should be talking about. So everything you're going to see now works in version 2 and later. Get WMI object, class Win32 service. My goal is to get a list of services that are set to start automatically, but that are not started. Computer name, DC. Let's give that a second to finish. Now, domain controller is still running several dozen services, so it may take it a moment or two to collect all of that data, get it across the network, and get PowerShell to turn it into objects here in the pipeline. I kind of want to see what data I'm working with before I start trying to filter it. Okay, so it looks like we've got a start mode, which is manual, or here's one, auto. So that tells me what value I need to be filtering for. And it's the state, not the status. The state says stopped or running. Okay, well, you should already know how to filter this, right? Where object, state equals, let's put state not equals running. There are other states like starting or stopping or paused. I just want everything that isn't running and what was the other one? Start mode. Start mode equals auto. Let's see what comes back from that. Hopefully nothing. I mean, if it's not running and it's set to start automatically, then sometimes there might be a problem. So kind of no news is going to be good news in this case. Oh, but there's a couple. Remote registry is set to start automatically but isn't running, and so is this SPP SVC. Now, I got to tell you something. What we've done right here violates the rule that I gave you earlier when we first talked about where object. I have asked the get WMI object command to retrieve potentially a whole mess of objects. So this command is going to produce one object for every single service that's running on that remote computer. Where object now has to look at each one of those. So I'm asking my computer to now loop through every single one of those services and find ones that meet both this criteria and this criteria. I have not moved the filtering as far to the left of the command line as possible. I'm getting way more data than I want and asking my computer to discard, frankly, most of it. Well, let's take a look at the get WMI object command and see if there's a better way. There is, of course, a better way, or I wouldn't have suggested it, and it is to use the get WMI object command's own -filter parameter. There is a trick here, though. Let's go to the full help and get down to that -filter parameter. This does not use PowerShell style filtering criteria. You'll notice that instead of -EQ, it uses the equal sign. So you've got to kind of shift back now. Remember what I told you when we first talked about filtering. When you use a -filter parameter on a command, the criteria you specify is typically being passed to the underlying technology. That means you have to learn what the underlying technology expects to see. That means in addition to PowerShell's comparison operators, you're also going to have to know WMIs. Equal, less than, greater than, not equal to, There's also a like operator, and it's designed for strings, string comparisons with wildcard. In WMI, strings always go in single quotes. That's why you're seeing the overall filter criteria enclosed inside double quotes here, so that the single quotes will be read as literal values and not as PowerShell string delimiters. If you're using the like operator in a WMI filter, the percent sign is your wildcard, not the asterisk as PowerShell uses. So yes, I'm afraid you do have to learn an entirely new set of filter, parameter, protocol, punctuation garbage. But if you get into the examples of get WMI object, there's plenty of examples to help remind you of what that correct filter criteria is. For example, here. So let's see if we can make a more efficient way of getting that list of services. Instead of using where object, I'll specify a filter parameter. And in double quotation marks, I'm going to say I want it to have a state, state equal to running. Actually, that's not what I wanted. I want the ones that were not running. I hit enter. Oh, heck. Well, now you're going to see what happens when you give WMI a filter that it does not understand. It is probably going to yell at me with a big old error message. Yep. Where state does not equal running and start mode equals auto. Auto. Let's see what comes back. Because I've sent that filter criteria to the remote computer, the remote computer's WMI service is processing that filter. It's actually doing the work. So all that comes across the wire and all that my computer has to deal with are the two services that actually meet my criteria. Now, I do want to show you quickly how to use that like. So I'm just going to put another and in here, and it'll be name like single quote this time, remote percent. So I should get anything that's state is not running and their start mode is auto and the name starts with the word remote. Little drum roll. We're going to actually do this twice because I want to show you that this is not case sensitive on those names. You'll notice that running and auto, I used all lowercase and that's not how they're displayed. But I want to put a lowercase r here as well. And I should get the same service back if it is case insensitive on this string comparison. Drum roll, and it is. So you don't need to worry about the case so much. So this is the proper way of doing filtering. Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult, but it is what it is. So the next thing I want to talk about would be a good time to pull up Internet Explorer. And there's a lot of folks who've been using WMI from all the way back in the good old VBScript days. So I'm going to put VBScript WMI query. Now back in the good old VBScript days, you didn't have a command exactly. You had to write an actual query in WML query language, or WQL. Some folks call it WCL. Let's just drop through here. Now, a lot of folks got very good at this WCL, and as you're browsing around the internet looking for other people's examples to repurpose, you're going to run across these WCL queries, and I want you to know that you can still use them inside PowerShell. So as soon as this web page loads, we'll see if it has a WCL query that we can repurpose. Okay, there it is. Let's scroll down a bit. Here we go. Typical VB script. And here's a typical WCL query. So I'm just going to put that on the clipboard here, if I can highlight it all. Tough to get in there. Okay. Copy. Now, you'll notice that this looks a lot like a structured query language or SQL query. I'm just going to put this in a variable. Paste. Select star from Win32 disk drive. Good enough. In PowerShell, you can still use those WCL queries. Now the equivalent of this would be get WMI object class Win32 disk drive. Okay, Easy enough. Let's actually change it to one that's more interesting. Let's go with logical disk. Okay, so I could add my filter criteria now. Drive type equals 3. The corresponding WCL would be select star, meaning all properties from Win32 logical disk, where drive type equals 3. And I can still use that query if I ran across it on the internet. Get WMI object, query, and then just give it your query. Since I have it in a variable, I'll just put it there. That can still be fired off against a remote computer as well. It's going to, so the WMI command is really taking parameters. Under the hood, it's constructing that WCL query. That's why when we provide filter criteria, we have to provide it in that syntax, because that's what WMI itself, the underlying technology, really understands. So you can also use those old queries if you happen to run across them on the inner tubes, which I think is a pretty darn useful thing to be able to do. All right, for the next bit, let's go to PowerShell version 3 so we can use these CIM commands over here. We'll do the same example, just so you can kind of see parallel instances there. The class was Win32 service. We'll do it from the computer DC, and we need to provide a filter. Same filter language. So what did I do? I said start mode equals auto and name like remote %. And I tell you, you are going to see yourself doing this, and I do it myself all the time. Don't get upset. It's just something to get used to. And state does not equal. You'll see me pausing there because I want to go does not equal. That's not going to work. Does not equal running. Whoops. The WCL query is invalid. Oh, what did we do wrong? Well, this is where it's time to look at the help. Help get CIM instance. Specifically, let's just look at some examples. We'll look for an example that uses the filter. You'll notice here, by the way, you can also specify minus query and just give it a straight up WCL query, so that's fine. See if we can find one that uses the filter parameter. If not, we'll go back to the main. Yeah, we'll go back to the main help. We'll look at the full help. Just take a look at that filter parameter, which I think I just passed. Filter string. Says do not use the where keyword, but otherwise you specify the WCL language. Well, then we need to fall back and look at that command again. And look what I think I might have done wrong. Now, I'll see if you can see it first. Do you see it yet? The easiest thing to do when you're typing these things. Let's take a look at this. Here's my first criteria, start mode equals auto, right? Here's my second criteria, name like remote. Here's my third criteria, state does not equal running. Notice that in between the first two criteria, I had a Boolean operator, but in between the second and third criteria, I had nothing. That'd be my problem. So I need to go back and make sure this has an and in here. Ah, there we go, and we get that back. And it is the remote registry service. It is set to start automatically, and it is currently not running, and so it met all the criteria. Again, let's do that with the regular query, get CIM instance query, select all properties from, and you don't, again, not case sensitive. Putting the keywords in uppercase is kind of a habit I have from working in the SQL language with database servers. It's not required. Looks nice. You know, not going to kill you. Win32 service where start mode equals auto and name like remote wildcard and state does not equal running. You will notice that by putting the keywords, especially that Boolean operator and in all uppercase, it makes it stand out a little bit, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to see the pattern that you're actually looking for, because you want to see that first criteria, Boolean, second criteria, Boolean, third criteria, and having those in uppercase, for me at least, just makes them visually stand out a little bit more, because I'm used to seeing them that way in documentation and in official examples. It just kind of fits well with my visual cortex. So there's something to keep in mind. Let's see if that actually works though, before I get all braggy about it. No. Select all from Win32 service where start mode equals auto. That's what we wanted. And name like remote. Yep, that's what we wanted. And state does not equal running. And that's the same thing we had before, was it not? Start mode equals auto. Name like remote percent. And state does not equal running. And I queried Win32 service. So what did I do wrong here? Take a look, see if you can figure it out. In fact, I'll eliminate distractions. We'll pull it right up there. Take a look at it for a second. Give it a pause. Troubleshooting queries is a good practice. Hopefully you hit pause and thought about it a little bit. I'm going to pull up the previous command, the one that did work. It was some version of this one because we had to put the and in here. Okay? Now let's go back to the one where I was getting a query which produced nothing. See if you can spot any difference between these. And I'm going to walk you through it. We need to make sure every element in the query is represented somewhere. So here I had the class name, Win32 service. That's there. I had start mode equal auto, and name like remote, and state does not equal running, The command name, get sim instance, that's right there, get sim instance. We didn't specify a class name, but I picked it up in the query right there. The only major piece I'm missing is right there. So how do you put a computer name into the query? Well, you actually don't. It remains a parameter and gets fired off. The query gets fired off to that computer. There we go. So sometimes when you're switching back and forth, it can be a little bit easy to lose track of that. So I kind of wanted to highlight that. The computer name still gets specified separately. And you can do multiple computer names. Fire the query off at both of them. So there's my DC. We've not talked to member before, so it's probably having to spin up a connection and authenticate and do all that fun stuff. We'll see if I've got it even enabled. Yep. Server name couldn't be resolved, so I might not even have that server online. That also shows that this will keep running. In fact, let's make that interesting. Let's put localhost first, which we know will return no results, but it at least should not return an error. We'll put member in the middle and then DC. Yep. Okay. So we continued. We got output even though the other two failed. And, you know, this is the bad part about these error messages too, because you don't know which computer generated this and which computer generated this. I have a feeling this came from my local host because I don't think I have remoting enabled. So although there's obviously PowerShell 3 installed, it wasn't able to make the connection. I can troubleshoot that real quick. Let's do enable PS remoting. Yes. See, remoting was not enabled. Let's try that same get sim instance again. See, the protocol has to actually be enabled. So now we just got the one error from member and we got no output. So let's now, let's take out one of these criteria here, like the name. An extra quote in there. Let's run that against all three. See, now with remoting enabled, the protocol was able to get through to my local host. And the fact that PowerShell 3 was installed means that the CIM command also worked. So both of those things have to happen. And I guess that's something else to highlight. The CIM commands do rely on remoting. If remoting isn't enabled, even if the machine is capable of talking CIM, if remoting's not enabled, the command won't work. So you have to have remoting enabled, which it is by default on Server 2012 and later server operating systems, but remoting is not enabled by default on client operating systems like my local host Windows 8 machine. By enabling remoting, I allowed the traffic to get through, and since PowerShell 3 is installed, the CIM stuff worked, and you see that I actually did get some output there. So that's all very nice. So that's queries as well as the filter criteria from the CIM side of the equation in PowerShell version 3. So I've shown you how to specify filter criteria using the -filter parameter, and we did that in both WMI and CIM. Also showed you how to use the old style WCL queries. Not that you need to write those, but if you're comfortable with the language already, then it's a great way to utilize your existing skills. It's also a great way to utilize stuff that you've picked up off the internet that was perhaps designed for a different language like VBScript. You can paste those right in to the query parameter of getWMIObject, for example, and they'll work great. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.